Welcome, pudding people, to another episode of Everybody Loves Pudding. I'm your host, Ken Seymour. Today, I have a guest that is a world traveler. He's an actor, he's a comedian, he is David Mills. Thank you for joining us.
Hi.
Hopefully not too overwhelming.
No, no,
um,
I can manage.
Good. Um, I'm kind of excited to have you on for a variety of different reasons. I'm a huge fan of stand-up comedy specifically. I've been following a variety of different performers over the years and just absolutely love the art form as it is. I have to say I was particularly tickled. I saw a small thing that you did in That Guy that was a bit on pronoun confusion, and
Right.
that was just particularly fun.
Right.
Does a lot of your comedy kind of revolve around language, or do you tend to focus on a more storytelling type of style?
It's funny you say that. Not funny, but what I mean to say is I do feel like the best comedy is really about language, not necessarily as directly as that particular skit or that particular routine where I'm talking about words, but it's all about the use of specific words and being really precise. The comedy that I like and the comedy that I do is about precision, right? So it's about saying things in a really specific way. So I have to spend a lot of time getting the words right. I remember a comic friend of mine, we sort of started out around the same time, and she kept um, struggling as a comic. And she had some good ideas, but she never put the time in personally, or I could observe, into writing the actual joke out. She would just try and express the idea. Well, that's fine, but oftentimes that means there's no punchline, or it's not set up, it's not built to give the audience a kind of surprise or a journey or something. So I guess what I encouraged her to do is actually write her comedy down, like with paper and pen, like literally, because then you have to think, what's the word I want to use to say what I want to mean here. And so it's a long way of answering your question, but I would say that all my work is really about language, and whether I'm being narrative or whether I'm a comment on a certain something happening in the news, or I do a lot of sort of commentary in my comedy, but the way I do it is to think hard about the words I use.
So, how did you get your start into this particular path? This is the stand-up comedy is I don't know if I'd call it a fickle mistress, but it is sometimes a difficult type of profession to pursue. What kind of lit the fire that put you on that path?
I was an actor. I'm still an actor, but when I started as an actor, um, I was waiting around a lot for the phone to ring, and I wanted to be on stage. So I just started writing my own material. And I started not as a stand-up, but as kind of a monologuist, doing these sort of one-person narrative shows. But then I wanted, and I did okay with that, but it wasn't like there was that much work in that either. There was more than there was the acting, but there still wasn't as much as I needed and wanted. So I started appearing and hanging out at this comedy club in San Francisco in the 90s. And, I could get on there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes pretty regularly, 2 or 3 times a week. So that was a way for me to develop material for my solo shows, but it quickly evolved into just doing stand-up. And I sort of let go of these kind of narrative monologues and just started focusing on a kind of a different kind of form that was comedy.
Who do you think are some of the people that really influenced how you developed? I mean, I saw that um, you've mentioned Sandra Bernhard and Paul Lynde specifically. Were those kind of key
Yeah,
players in the formative process that was you?
absolutely. Yeah. Um, I think Sandra Bernhard, a lot of people don't know her early work. I don't know if you've seen that film, Without You, I'm Nothing,
Hmm.
but it's really seminal, in American stand-up. So much of the way that she positions herself around celebrity is what we do today very naturally, and her kind of way of being a celebrity and yet commenting on it at the same time was really new, really fresh when she was doing it. And her the way she weaves jokes, kind of conventional stand up, into all of a sudden you're in the midst of a story and then you're back in conventional stand up. So she's one of the greats, and she worked with a director at that time. I've forgotten his name. I feel bad to say, but he was also very central in that kind of approach. So she remains to me a real touchstone. Paul Lynde, I mean, again, another great American humorist that people don't really think about, but his attitude and his ability to kind of uh, make fun of anyone and anything, but do it in this very self-deprecating way, really, really was influential. Yeah, for me. And then some British comics. There's actually an Irish comic by the name of Dave Allen, who was really big in the 70s. And I used to watch him on PBS growing up in the 80s. He would show up on PBS, and he always sat in a chair, and he always wore a suit, and he was very elegant and very, very funny. These long, sort of winding stories. So I've taken a lot from him as well.
Well, I have to say, Lind has always been one of my favorites. Now, maybe it's just because I have a soft spot from growing up with the um, animated
Mm-hmm.
Charlotte's Web. It's just like glot,
Mm-hmm.
glot, glot. It's like, yeah, that voice just always just kind of sticks with you, and the way that
Yeah,
you would begin laughing before he ever got to the punchline, just because he
absolutely.
was having as much fun as anybody else in the process of delivering everything. Um,
Absolutely. His delivery was so signature. No one has done it before, and no one's done it after. And the way he used his face and the way he would pause before he would deliver the line. I mean, his eyes were so expressive. He's so funny. And I find myself on YouTube watching old clips of him on Hollywood Squares,
right?
I mean, it's that funny. It's really, really good stuff. I try and mainline it, as much as I can. So a lot of people ask me who I look at these days, and there are very few comedians I look at these days. I mean, I'm out at the club, so I see a lot of comics, but I almost never watch a full special. If I want to watch comedy, I'll go look at old Paul Lynde clips, or reach back on YouTube into Dave Allen or Bob Newhart, or Don Rickles or Rodney Dangerfield or Joan Rivers or Phyllis Diller. You know what I mean? From another era, really, is what inspires me most.
Well, and you worked with Joan Rivers, right? You were.
I never worked with Joan
Did you
Rivers.
not work with
No,
Joan Rivers? I thought I saw that you
no,
were involved with something on her. I'm gonna have to look through my
no,
notes again.
no, 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 no.
Boy, that would have
I
been
think
good.
there was a review one time that said I was in the tradition of Joan Rivers. I'm not
Ah,
entirely sure what that means, but that's the only kind of association I've had with her.
quick acerbic wit, maybe.
Maybe that's it.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah, but so where did you take that jumping off point? You said you were in acting first. Did you get into that in like high school and college, or was that something that you determined later in life?
No, it was definitely high school and college, and I was getting out of college. I was in San Diego, and I was beginning to act in the community and the professional theaters in San Diego, and the more kind of mid-level theaters there as well. So I was beginning to have some success, but not enough to fulfill me. And also, I thought if I could do these kind of have some success around a kind of long form monologue, that could give me some exposure that would then help me get acting parts. So that was the journey.
So, okay, you've performed in the United States, you've performed overseas. I've always kind of wondered, I expect maybe this is just the ignorance and the non-traveler in me, that there would be a little bit different of a feel for the types of audiences that you might get between the two different locations. What
Yeah.
is something that was unique about performing in the UK compared to the United States?
Well, I'm in New York now, having been based in London for 23 years, and I've just come back to New York. I really came back in February. I went back to London for May, but now I'm back again. So I was here February through April, went back for May. Now I'm back in New York for the duration or for the foreseeable future. And I would say that one of the things that is really notable about performing in London versus performing in New York is that London audiences and comics are much more international. So New York is very diverse, but it's not as international.
Hmm.
So oftentimes on a bill in London, there'll be, let's say, 6 comics. 2 of them will be British. There'll be maybe an American, maybe someone French. Increasingly, they're Chinese comics. Chinese are coming up the ranks. South African, Indian, Australian, Canadian. London is really a global comedy center. So it feels, so the comics are international, and also the audiences. So the host will start by saying, "Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from?" And people will be from all over the world, and you get that in New York, but really only if you're in Times Square, that kind of area, because that's where all the tourists are. But in the UK, you can be pretty far away from London and still feel an international flavor to the audience. Not always, but often. So that's one of the things that is immediately different. And you have to ensure that your comedy isn't so referential to British culture that the people, your audience, goes over their head. So you have to find things that are a bit more universal. I guess that's one of the key differences.
Have you noticed different, let's say, reaction styles? Are the general attitudes within the crowds basically the same? We're all human, we all react the same, or is there a cultural kind of shift?
I think there is a little bit. Americans generally want you to succeed, and Brits are a little more ambivalent. So they are happy for you to fail. Americans will, if you really bomb, well, of course you can bomb here in the US, but they want you to succeed. They'll laugh if they see you struggling. Oftentimes they'll laugh because it's uncomfortable for them. But Brits are perfectly happy for you to be, just, flailing up there.
Crickets.
And so they don't cut you too much slack.
When you're creating your routine that you're going to be doing, since we were talking a little bit about the language being important, how does that affect how you structure your presentation? We talked about some of the storytellers. I mean, I remember things like looking at the historical things like Samuel Clemens going around and just telling stories. I mean, I see a lot of people that even do that today. I mean, people may make fun of me by comparing Kevin Smith to that, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
similar kind. I always felt it's just telling stories, life, relating life.
Yeah.
How do you is that kind of the what we're talking about when you're talking about creating that kind of monologue, or is it more akin to creating almost a character in of itself, like a Shakespearean monologue?
I sort of always play myself, but I don't pretend that I'm being authentic. Does that make sense? Like, it's clear I'm joking. I do this stuff about LinkedIn, right?
Hmm.
You know, again, universal. Everyone knows LinkedIn, right? And I talk about how I'm looking for a job on LinkedIn. Well, I'm not looking for a job on LinkedIn. You know, personally, I'm not looking for a job on LinkedIn, but I know LinkedIn and I have looked for jobs on LinkedIn and I know what that experience is. But instead of saying, oh, I looked for a job on LinkedIn, I just say like, oh, I'm looking for a job on LinkedIn. And then I just act as if I were. So it's like playing a part of someone who's looking for a job on LinkedIn. I mean, that's a kind of a small example, but I do things about gun crime and I talk as if I've experienced gun crime or not experienced that that I shot someone. You know, I know that sounds hard to imagine that that's funny, but what I try and do is make it so absurd because it is absurd what's going on.
Right.
And you really only need to talk about it, you know, oh, you know, walking in without a license, buying a gun and being able to walk around with it all day long. It's totally absurd. So instead of saying this is absurd, I just talk about it like it is and everyone can see it's absurd, right? So as far as structure goes, I'm constantly kind of shifting into different kind of scenarios, putting me as this character in these different scenarios. So that's kind of the structure I use to, but what I don't do is talk about my actual life. I'm not someone that talks about my relationship or my family, and I don't do that. That's not my style.
So it's kind of the Monty Python approach. Bring the absurdity in story form.
Yeah, there's some of that. Yeah,
I,
some of that definitely.
Now, one thing that's always felt a little absurd to me is kind of the true crime obsession that so many people have had. And I was looking at some of your work. You actually got to play DB Cooper
Yes.
in a role. That seems like were you kind of familiar with DB Cooper before you did the role?
I was, yeah. Obviously, it was filmed in the UK. It was a British filmmaker, so they are much less familiar than DB Cooper than I am. But I knew of him, and I knew that he was the inspiration for Agent Daryl Cooper in Twin Peaks. So that was the part that Kyle MacLachlan played. It was Kyle MacLachlan, wasn't it?
I do believe that is accurate. Yes.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, my family's on the West Coast, and my siblings are up in Portland, Oregon, and then that's kind of the part of where he, uh, you know, became famous, if you will. So yeah, I'm aware of DB Cooper, and I was thrilled to play the part. I only wish I could play again, you know.
So I just in my mind, I'm imagining this. So you're putting on the suit, you've got the glasses, you got the whole thing going on, and I'm just in my mind for the documentary. They're creating the scene. You're there, and I just hear the words. But can you be more quietly menacing? It's like no, you don't look angry enough. You don't look like you're going to do anything to the plane. Can you be more menacing?
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what's so great about him is no one really knows anything about him. So you can completely create this entire character on your own, you know, and fill it with as much menace or whatever you want because he was a blank slate, you know.
Yeah, this always been something that's been entertaining to me is just some of this interest in the things that we don't exactly know what happened, but people will revisit it over and over again. And it's fun. It's kind of a fun pastime. It's just kind of like having a sequel to a popular movie that comes out repeatedly. You are in a sequel to Indiana Jones
That's right.
out
Yes.
here. That
Yes.
How did that happen?
You know, a lot of times in how do I want to say this? So a lot of the big blockbusters are filmed in the UK because Hollywood gets a real discount, tax sort of discount. So it's cheaper for them to film in the UK. There's a lot of talent, sort of not just acting talent, but production talent, costumes, makeup, production design, props. That's all that is really strong in the UK. So it makes sense sometimes for these big blockbusters to be filmed in the UK, and it's cheaper for them. It's funny how this is all about money, right? It's cheaper for them to hire American actors based in the UK sometimes than to fly actors from the US over to play parts. So I was often auditioning for, Avengers films and, you know, uh, big blockbusters like that, big superhero films in the UK. And I didn't get most of them, but I did get a small role in Indiana Jones. So, and what's funny is they oftentimes, when you see these films, like Batman is an example, the most recent one, when they film, they film in the UK, but when they want to film New York City, they film in Glasgow, because there are a few blocks of Glasgow that look like Wall Street. And if you have a vision of what Wall Street is in your mind, those sort of classical column buildings, that kind of thing. And they can CGI around that. So they filmed, you can see it in the trailer, there's a ticker tape parade, which is a kind of important moment in the new Indiana Jones film. And they filmed that whole sequence up in Glasgow.
That's too much fun. Did you get a chance to interact with either Harrison Ford or John Rhys Davies or anything? Get a chance to
No,
get
unfortunately
close?
not. Unfortunately not. No, I thought I saw Harrison Ford in the, passing by, and I was like, oh my God, it's Harrison Ford. And then the person on the film who was with me, like, you have like a steward, someone who's taking care of you or whatever. He said, oh no, that's Harrison Ford's stunt double. It looked just like him, just like him.
Uh, I feel like I need one of those on certain days.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be nice.
So okay, let's touch a little bit. You're talking about being in New York right now. The club that you're performing at the moment is Pangea, correct?
That's right.
That club looks absolutely gorgeous. It
Yeah,
doesn't evoke, to my mind at least, what you would normally expect if you're going to go out for a night on the town and want to experience comedy. It's not the normal comedy club sort of
that's
thing.
right. Yeah.
Uh, what what is what is the lure of Pangea? Give it a verbal description for our listeners that have not been to visit New York thus far.
Uh, Pangea is a real old school New York downtown, mostly jazz and cabaret venue. So most of the performance there is music based, and all sorts of well known, high profile people have gone through there at one point in their career. It's not big enough to, you've got to pass through it, because if you're going up in your career, you're going to want to move to bigger spaces to make more money. And if you're coming down in your career, you may find yourself there again. I like to think of myself as going up.
Well,
Um,
it is like I said, it's gorgeous.
yeah, it's great. And I think because it has such a strong old school flavor, there's a lot to subvert. So you can go in and be really different quite easily. Um, so that's what I like to do. I like to be the thing that feels distinctive in the mix. Like I want to find venues and be unexpected in those venues.
When you're doing your performance at this location, one thing that just kind of itched the back of my mind is kind of the change in how stand up has presented over the years. And where I'm going with this, what I mean is, when you go nowadays there's the stage. The performers on the stage, generally speaking, there's going to be that separation. There's going to be that distance. But it
Right.
looks like there is the opportunity to have more of a throwback interaction, like wandering amidst the tables
Yeah.
with this.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what happens?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that. So I did the show twice in April at Pangea, and now I'm back for 4 shows, 2 in June and 2 in July. And I work with a producer director, and we have thought a lot about the show since April, and we want to break down that wall even more than we have in the past. And so I think people can expect that I'm going to be in the audience going forward, not for the whole show, but really have moments where I sort of wander into the audience and use that and kind of disrupt the expectation, you know. Yeah, I want it to feel really really different. What I don't want it to feel like is, I want people to think they're going to see a show, like where they just sit back and I perform a show, and it's got a beginning, middle, and an end, and all those conventions. But from this show tonight, it's going to feel very different. I'm going to really, it's going to feel much more like I don't know what it's going to feel like, but I'm not going to do that. So I will be in the audience. Yeah.
It does seem like a wonderful opportunity to be able to make it feel personal to the people that
Yeah.
are there.
Yeah.
And
And
that,
for it to change every show. You know what I mean? For it to really, so you feel like you're seeing something tonight, and then tomorrow night it's going to be very different. And to me, that's an exciting experience for audience members. I think I get bored of seeing things. You see them like the fourth show in a run of 6, and they've already done it 4 times. So you begin to feel like, well, what's special about this? So I want it to really change every night, you know?
yeah, it looks like it'll be a lot of fun. I just I'm trying it's like on the one of those things that's on the tip of my tongue to kind of feel maybe like a 60s Atlantic City sort of
Yeah.
vibe.
I
Uh
love that idea.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just
I also love the idea. Just think of this visual, right? Like, maybe I may have made this up, but like Greenwich Village, kind of 60s, all these bohemians sitting on the floor, and the performer, maybe a folk singer or a storyteller or whatever, on a stool, and everyone sort of sat around. You know what I mean? I mean, we're not exact. It's not going to be exactly that, but that feel of like a meeting almost. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, that it's cozy. It's
Cozy.
personal.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that seems like so much fun. Now, if you've never been down to Bloomington, Indiana, you should definitely come down and perform at the Comedy Attic. It is a fantastic venue, and the stand-up comedy is alive and well.
Good to hear it.
We love the person that runs the place does a fantastic job and always brings in a wide array of different types of performers that will generally you're going to find somebody that you like at any given point. It's just wonderful. So yeah,
Well,
you
there's a great scene. I know there's a great scene in the Midwest, so I'm keen to get out there.
yeah, you should definitely do that. Um, Now you mentioned that you, and kind of in our closing time, you mentioned that you had auditioned to some big blockbusters, some comic book films. Now that's kind of my wheelhouse. A lot of what we talk about on this podcast is the intersection of media in terms of film and television and things like that,
Right.
and
Right.
the source of comics. Now, were you, by any chance, a comic book fan?
Yes, I was.
So well, I guess I should say, what were the titles that drew you?
I was a big fan of the Frank Miller Daredevil era. That was my that was my biggest. I had been a comic book fan, but quite kind of broad-based Marvel, DC, kind of consume anything. But then that run of Frank Miller Daredevil really inspired me, and really when that ended, I kind of let go of comics.
that happens. We make those connections with certain artists, certain writers. I
Yeah.
know a lot of people are kind of feeling that bit of pain today. As of the time of recording this, John Romita just passed away
Yes.
today,
Yes. I saw that. I
and
saw that.
he was iconic in what he
Yeah.
did. So okay, well let's do this. I've started asking this hypothetical question to anybody that comes on the show.
Mm.
Um, and so there's kind of a two-part thing. So if part one is if you had a chance to play any comic character, whether it's Marvel, DC, Image, Independence, whatever, in a film or television, theater, production, whatever, who would you choose and why?
I mean, I think I would choose Bullseye.
It's a good choice.
So Bullseye, you recall, was the kind of Daredevil's arch nemesis
Mm-hmm.
that Daredevil almost killed. And but he came back, and he was a real madman, real like a Joker kind of character, real sadistic, um, sinister, nefarious kind of character. And I think that would just be such a thrill to go that dark.
Yeah, that's and as much as I like Colin Farrell, his take was very kind of over the top, and I'd love to see just a more subdued because he's definitely insane, but and I see what you're saying with the Joker, but he wasn't kind of he's not going to be throwing out bombs and tear gas and jokes and things like that. It's all about achieving whatever his awful goal is, and that can be a lot of fun to play.
And it feels to me that he's quite it's Bullseye, right? So he's really focused, and his mania, it doesn't spill out in the same way as the Joker does. It's really targeted and honed, and I think even more terrifying because of that.
Yeah, definitely so. And I always do kind of my fan casting sort of thing too when I look at this because I look at mannerisms and kind of the general look of who I'm talking to and try and come up with it's like, well, where would I slot this person? And when I was looking at some of your films and some of the way you carry it's like I thought Ben Urich was the first thing.
Oh, right. That would be a great part as well. In fact, I auditioned to play Ben Urich.
Really?
Yeah, he had a small part in another Marvel TV show. I forget which one. It wasn't Daredevil, but he was Ben. The character was called Ben Urich, and he was a reporter.
Right.
And I thought, oh, this is Ben Urich, who I know from the Daredevil titles, and now he's made an appearance in one of the other ones. I forget which one. I think one that came and went. I forget which one it was. Um,
Yeah.
but that would have been a thrill.
That's definitely a fun imaginary game. Now, the second part of this question is more general.
Okay.
We always have the imagination, the genie. You find a lamp, magic lamp, and a genie comes out of it. But this genie has been living in Hollywood for a long time, and his wishes are very, very specific. So he's not going to be able to grant you wealth or cars or mystical powers, but he can grant you the opportunity to work with any three artists that you admire, whether they're actors, directors, musicians. Who would you choose?
Wow. I mean, there's so many again, what a thrill. I would love to work with I would love to work with Spike Lee. I would love to work with I'd love to work with Wong Kar-wai. And I'd like to work with I've forgotten his name. But this Greek director who directed Triangle of Sadness.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, those are some good choices. I know with Spike Lee specifically, he always had such a visceral approach to
Yeah.
how his films would appear, and I always appreciated that kind of raw feeling. Um, absolutely, too much fun, too much fun. Well, okay, so in kind of a closing sort of a thing here, you're going to be at Pangea at June 15th and the 22nd, and July 6th and the 13th.
That's right.
Um, after that, if our listeners wanted to find out what it was that David Mills was going to be up to, what is the best way to follow you on social media?
The best way is to go onto my Instagram, and it's at David Mills DEPT, as if you're looking at, say, David Mills Department, right? But the abbreviation, so David Mills Dept. And from there, I mean, I put everything on in my stories mostly, but then I also have a link tree from there, and you can see my website, you can see my IMDb, you can see my newsletter. So that's where I go into more detail about what's coming up.
Well, fantastic. I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and to give us a glimpse into what the life of being a stand-up comic and actor is like. We always appreciate that. And I hope that you have just absolutely packed rooms that you play to. And
Thank you.
And I look forward to hopefully having you on again sometime when you finally get that part, when you become
Absolutely,
Bullseye.
absolutely. You'll be the first one I call when I get that Marvel film. When I get Bullseye, I'll be in touch.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, sir.
So great. It's great to be here. Thank you.